So, I have a quick quote, and then we'll get into a couple of articles. John had provided me with this quote from Friedrich Bonhoeffer, who you may have heard about, that was a pastor during the time of the war, the Second World War, and he was ultimately executed for his faith. But he's well known for just powerful, powerful faith. And this is just one quote, and it just kind of resonated with me from him, and written sometime between 1930 and 31. And it just says the Union students talk a blue streak without the slightest substantive foundation and with no evidence of any criteria. Sound familiar? Some things will never change. They are unfamiliar with even the most basic questions. They become intoxicated with liberal and humanistic phrases, laugh at the fundamentalists, and yet basically are not even up to their level. In New York, they preach about virtually everything, only one thing is not addressed, or is addressed so rarely that I've been able to hear it: the gospel of Jesus Christ, the cross, sin, forgiveness, death, and life. So this is really what's going on. We're in a world that has so rejected the gospel, and I have some information here we'll go over in just a moment, but uh, the percentage today, particularly among younger people, of those that profess faith in Jesus Christ it's almost negligible. It's just declining so rapidly, and we're paying the price for that, I think. So tonight the plan is to further look at the rapture, and I don't know if we'll get finished. We'll finish it tonight, but we're gonna try, and we'll see what where the Lord takes us after that. We have 2 more weeks. We got tonight and then the following 2 weeks. Tonight is the 4th, then the 10th and the 18th, 16th will be the last one, because the church basically closes down after that. So if anything of significance comes up during the summer, we'll send out an email and see if we can't get together via YouTube or something. Okay, so a couple of articles. This was I subscribed to Bill Koenig's. Oh, before we get into that, uh, Rick was talking about Israel, and one of the things that I would encourage you, if you have time, to pull up and to listen to is Caroline Glick's. I've mentioned her name many times. Her dialogue or her commentary on what the latest peace proposal put forth by President Biden is all about. It's an eye opener, and she's speaking from the perspective of a Jewish citizen, a writer, brilliant lady, and she dissects that speech, every which way. So his speech the other night when he proposed the peace agreement, and he said that this is actually Israel's proposal. Not true. So at any rate, I'm not going to go into it in any great detail, but it's kind of long. She's long-winded, but she comes at it with facts, and again, I think it's very telling what's going on between the United States and yeah, I think it was like Friday or Sunday. It might have been Sunday she did it. Don't quote me on it, but I think it's one of the more recent ones.
Well, if I could just mention, this might be helpful to some people. You, for those of you who listen to Amir, or you get Amir Safarti routinely, you probably get him by way of Telegram, app Telegram. Also on Telegram, you can easily get Caroline Glick, Jack Hibbs, Olive Tree Ministry, that's Jan Markell, and if you're so inclined, even Tucker Carlson. But it's a lot easier than going to individual websites and trying to figure out where they at. They're
Yeah.
all available. And they just come right up as a little list right on your television.
Oh, thank you. So a couple of articles. I subscribe to, and I have for many, many years, a weekly uh, news update that is done by a guy by the name of Bill Koenig. Some of you may be familiar with that name. He's the author of Eye to Eye. He's a former White House correspondent, so very, very knowledgeable. And I just want to read, I'm basically pulling out some information from the middle of this week's update, and I'm just going to hit on a couple of paragraphs that I think are pretty self-explanatory. And it starts out this way. It says, the bait and switch from a free market capitalist society based on merit and effort to a socially engineered, equality based, I think he meant equity based, anti meritocratic globalist social commune knows no better customers. And he goes on to say, and this is a key, this is right along with what Bonhoeffer wrote. When God is absent, collective humanity is left in an endless power struggle without humans, other humans, and self. Therein, the power struggle to control the rest of us looms large. And we've been talking about this quest for power, and it's been something that humanity has been dealing with from time immemorial, and certainly is a big deal today with the globalists and the dark state and the World Economic Forum and all the Rockefellers and the Gates of the world. It's all about power, power and control. But the real pain that each human suffers in the absence of God is seen in the battle with self and the inability to see the futility of the effort. And I think that's pretty powerful. You know, um, it's kind of like without God, what's the purpose? Is there any purpose? I don't think there's any purpose. I mean, we can go through life, and obviously, we all have needs and wants and desires and duties. But at the end of the day, the only thing that's going to matter is our relationship with Jesus Christ. Other than that, there's really nothing. And here's from First Peter 2:11. Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul. And I speak from experience. We all know that, the passions of the flesh, whatever they might be, materialism, notoriety, whatever it might be. Once you get to the top of the heap, as these charlatans seem want to so desperately do, then what? Enjoy the havoc they've wreaked on others. These major changes in America in just 3 short years are not a coincidence. Events involving powerful people and trillions of dollars have occurred. These events have caused corporations to adopt little known climate paradigms in shocking unison, as well as to witness the U.S. government take center stage, dictating and paying for unsolicited, quote, transition and transformation. You remember at the beginning of the Biden administration, his goal, his statement was to fundamentally transform America. And that strategy is still at work. Transformation by employing the coffers of U.S. taxpayer dollars as their own to do with as they see please, as they please. No longer are a majority of Americans represented in government decisions. The people's voice seems to have become an obligation our government neither needs nor wants. A marked change from serving the people under God to serving self, money, and power has the current administration censoring our media with little regard for our First Amendment, demanding the use of tax dollars be spent on proxy wars half a world away, and forcing progressive leftist schools of thought using the new chicanery on a still silent, still Christian majority in this great nation. We began as a melting pot with equal opportunity and measured ourselves by God's commandments. When we were called, quote, white supremacist Christian nationalists, if we abide, and we're called white supremacist Christian nationalists if we abide by these same principles today. Americans have not changed. Our government has changed, marching to the drum of global governments, not to the people under God. Unless we acquiesce to whatever is forced on us by our increasingly dictatorial government, and I tell you, I can feel that. It's kind of like a slow drip. It's death by a thousand cuts. Is what it is. It's slow, it's insidious, it's subtle, but it's happening. Governance now includes social engineering with forced acceptance of everything the Bible calls a sin. And for the sake of not getting kicked off of YouTube, I think we know what those things are. It's just lunacy. Everything is just virtually upside down. Governance now includes social engineering with forced acceptance of everything the Bible calls a sin. Today's acceptance is a form of enabling that breeds mediocrity, does harm to self, and pits us against each other in a self absorbed, sinful arrogance that relegates God to the periphery and puts man on the throne of hubris. And another quote from James 4:6. God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So some pretty powerful words, I think, that he's come up with. A little bit strong, a little bit forward, but I think what we can see all these things that are clearly taking place in our world today. Next, here's an article, and I'm only going to read it. We've read it probably 150 times, and that's a quick passage in Revelation chapter 6. And I'll just start with verse 1 of Revelation 6. This is the beginning of the tribulation, right in chapter 6. I watched as the Lamb, who's Jesus Christ, opens the first of the seventh seal. Then I heard one of the four living creatures say in a voice like thunder, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, but he was given a crown and he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest. So that's a reference to the coming uh, Antichrist. He comes on with a bow, but no arrow. In other words, he's going to try to take over the world, at least first, through uh, pomp and ceremony and charisma and so on and so forth. Then the second seal. I heard the second seal say, "Come." Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make people kill each other. To him was given a large sword. So we see at the beginning the entry of the Antichrist, and then shortly after that, there's going to be war breaking out all over the world. And that's where, remember, Jesus talked about wars and rumors of wars. And we're hearing about that now. The stage is being set for this time of war. And then verse 5, when the Lamb opened the third seal, I heard the living creature say, "Come." I looked, there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in its hand. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the four living creatures saying, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wages, and 6 pounds of barley for a day's wages, and do not damage the oil and wine. So, what we see here pictured is a time coming when likely inflation's going to be off the charts. And that with the exception of those that they are saving the oil and wine for, which I would suggest are the elites of the world, whomever they may be. I think we can pretty much tell right now who at least some of them are. But there will be a group of elites, and then there'll be everybody else. And the everybody else, uh, probably no more middle class, but the everybody else will be having to work a full day for one loaf of bread. That's basically what this is saying. And so this article kind of ties into that. And its title is the stage being set for the global food crisis prophecy of Revelation 6:6, what we just read about? Now remember, this is the tribulation. This is actually the first part of the tribulation. And because it's during the first part of the tribulation, we're not here. We've been raptured. We're gone when this occurs. But what we're seeing now is the stage being set, stage setting almost everywhere. So uh, it just makes you wonder how much longer it can be until the rapture takes place. But we will soon see a major prophecy. Will we soon see a major prophecy in the book of Revelation be fulfilled? Global food prices have been skyrocketing and hunger has been spreading like wildfire all over the world. I don't think any of us are surprised by the growing food prices. The hunger, that's not something that's necessarily in our backyard, but I think it's probably coming. We desperately need 2024 to be a year of good harvests, but unfortunately, weather patterns are not cooperating at all, and bad news about harvest forecasts just continues to pour in from many of the planet's most important agricultural regions. Global food supplies just keep getting tighter and tighter, and the agricultural price spikes that we are witnessing right now are definitely quite ominous. Could it be possible the stage is now being set for the global food crisis prophecy, which we just read of Revelation 6:6? In that verse, we are warned of a time when food prices will soar to absolutely frightening levels. Then I heard a voice in the midst of the four living creatures, a quart of wheat for a day's wages, and 3 quarts of barley for a day's wages, and do not harm the oil or the wine, we just read. We certainly haven't reached that point yet, but we are on the way. In this article, I'd like to share what's been going on with a number of our most important agricultural commodities recently. For example, I think we mentioned this a few weeks ago. Poor harvests in Brazil have caused the price of orange juice to approximately double in the last 12 months. The benchmark frozen concentrated orange juice futures traded on the Intercontinental Exchange in New York closed at 477 a pound on Wednesday, it's a week ago tomorrow. That's nearly double the price registered a year ago. The price of coffee, and this one frightens me, is going haywire. So if you love coffee, I would stock up now while you still can. Thanks to extremely dry conditions in Brazil and Vietnam, coffee prices were sharply up this week. Excuse me. Last week, coffee trader Bull Cafe said Vietnam's 2024 to 25 Robusta coffee crop may only be 24 million bags, the lowest in 13 years, as poor rainfall in Vietnam has caused, quote, irreversible damage to coffee blossoms. Volcofe projects a global Robusta deficit of 4.6 million bags in 24-25, a smaller deficit than the 9 million bag deficit seen in 2023-24, but the fourth consecutive year of bean deficits. Wheat is specifically mentioned in Revelation 6:6, and Bloomberg is reporting that a confluence of factors has pushed the price of wheat to the highest level in 10 months. Futures climbed as high as 3.3% in Chicago before paring some of the gain. Analysts have been cutting production estimates for top exporter Russia in recent weeks, while Ukraine, I don't think you may remember that Ukraine was known as the breadbasket of the world, the leading producer of crops because of the apparently, and that's why the war the ground war can only occur in the wintertime when the ground freezes because the loam and the soil is so thick and so perfect for growing crops that you can't travel over it. Ukraine is headed for its driest May on record. Historically low rainfall in Western Australia is also adding to nervousness. Unfortunately, this is just the beginning. I am entirely convinced that the price of wheat will soon go far higher than it is right now. So if you think that the price of bread is high now, just wait till you see what's coming next. Meanwhile, the price of beef just surged to another brand new all-time high. Let's take a look at First Timothy chapter 4 real quick. First Timothy 4, the prophecy. The Spirit clearly says that in the latter times, which is the time which we're in now, which is fast approaching, some will abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits and things taught by demons. Such teachings come through hypocritical liars whose consciences have been seared as with a hot iron. And here we say they forbid people to marry and to order them to abstain from certain foods. From certain foods. Now, that word certain foods in the King James Version is meats. So they are going to order people to abstain from meat, which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and those who know the truth. Now, I listened to an interview just last week that Bill Gates gave, where he said we really need to cut down on meat consumption. And the reason being that cows produce 6% of the methane that is expelled into the atmosphere and is contributing to climate change. And they said, well, what do you do, or what are people going to do? He says, well, I just happen to be invested in artificial meat companies. And yeah, they grow them from cells. They're already selling artificial. Well, I don't think it's artificial. I don't think that's the best word for it, but it's grown from cells, chicken. So, but this is when you read, yeah, lab grown, exactly. So when you read in First Timothy 4, and we read things like this, is this Bible prophecy just one more thing being fulfilled, or what? I mean, it's clearly there.
Florida has banned lab grown. Yes.
Pardon me?
Florida has banned lab
Yeah,
grown.
right,
So there are some states that are trying to
right.
act against
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Okay, so meanwhile, the price of beef just surged to another brand new all-time record high. Beef prices skyrocketed to a new record high this Memorial Day weekend as industry experts warn costs could continue to rise even higher if current regulatory and economic conditions remain unchanged. You know, it's all tied into climate change. And we have leaders and uh, people that are trying to control what we consume, what we eat. But yet, God says right here, for everything God created is good, and nothing is to be rejected if it is received with thanksgiving. Well, if I get a nice ribeye steak, I'm very thankful. We don't get those very often. But anyway, um, but you see, it's just another example of how the world and the authorities are defying what God has laid out. You know, so much of what we're seeing is a rejection of biblical truth. The official regulators, are trying to push these high prices as a new norm, where wheat is only a treat for the wealthy. That's where they are pushing us, and that is where we are going. You may be thinking that if beef gets too expensive, you'll just eat more chicken and turkey. Sadly, chicken and turkey prices are poised to go a lot higher thanks to the bird flu. A fresh wave of the bird flu is sweeping across the nation, and Iowa Republican Governor Kim Reynolds just declared a state of emergency in one county in her state due to an outbreak there. The order comes after a case of avian influenza was confirmed among a large flock of egg-laying chickens in Sioux County on Tuesday by state and local agricultural officials, according to a report from CBS News. As a result, the animals will be destroyed and their remains will be isolated in an attempt to prevent further spread of the contagion. In total, some 4.2 million chickens will be put down. What do you think that losing 4.2 million chickens will do to egg prices? To make matters worse, one of the nation's largest producers of free-range eggs just experienced a devastating fire killing millions of chickens. Farina Farms Poultry Farm Inc. poultry farm was engulfed in flames Wednesday evening and has resulted in millions of chickens being killed, according to the Marion County Sheriff's Department. 1.3 million chickens died in the fire and said we're back. Sorry about that. So at any rate, back into the rapture of the church. And my notes on the rapture are pretty voluminous, so I'm not going to go through everything. We've all heard the rapture studies, I think, in the past, but kind of taken a different angle, if you will. And I think last week we started to look at Luke 17.
Are you sure you're transmitting?
Yeah. Yeah. I actually shut it off for a second.
Okay.
I'm going to hit the wrong button, so hopefully people will. Luke 17, verses 26 to 29. So it said, just as it was in the days of Noah, so will it be in the days of the Son of Man. People were eating, drinking, marrying.
What verse?
26.
26.
26.
17? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, Luke 17. People were eating, drinking, marrying, given in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. Then the flood came and destroyed them all. It was the same in the days of Lot. People were eating, drinking, buying, selling, planting, and building. But the day Lot left Sodom, fire and sulfur rained down from heaven and destroyed them all. It will be just like this on the day the Son of Man is revealed. And the day represents not a specific day, but a period of time. During that period of time, conditions in the world will be just like they were up until the time of the flood, and described as a time of eating, drinking, just kind of a the world goes on attitude. Everything is okay. The economy is in bad shape. The federal feds will just print more money and everything will be okay.
I think you're
It just
putting
kind
out a
of,
signal.
pardon me?
I don't think you're putting out a
Yeah.
signal.
Yeah.
Okay.
There'll be just as it is today. It'll be just like it was during the time of Noah. And so we talked a little bit about um, just that period of normalcy. Things will be basically during a time of normal behavior, normal activity when this takes place. And so I think what's pretty safe to say here is that this is not a reference to the second coming, because when Jesus comes back the second time, the world is going to be in the midst of Armageddon. 50% of the world's population will have died. The rivers, the streams will have turned blood, will not be drinkable. There'll be demonic attacks unlike anything the world has ever seen. That's hardly a time when people will be marrying and giving in marriage and just kind of going along their normal business. So, what Jesus is most likely talking about here is the time of the rapture. What he's saying is, and if he's talking about that, certainly he's talking about a time before the second coming of Jesus Christ. He has to be, because right now we're in that period of time. So much going on, but how many people do we know that are really paying attention? People are just going about, and I don't fault people for that. It's just the way we are. People go about their everyday things and everything's fine and so on and so forth, and they're not paying attention. So we, I think, are a little more schooled in what's going on in the world and know that the rapture and so forth is coming soon. So we're in a period of relative normalcy. Uh, I'm not going to go through a lot of this, but what we're seeing is the birth pangs for the tribulation. You can hear the four horsemen on the horizon. The hoofbeats are beginning to become more prevalent every day, which means the rapture's getting closer and closer and closer. And so we're leading or we're getting to the end of that period of relative normalcy. And what I mean by that is that, and we mentioned this last week, for any country, for example, like the United States, relative normalcy can include periods of times when there's wars and there's famines and there's disease and depressions and all those types of things. That's relatively normal as you look at a period of, say, 200 to 2,000 years. But what's not normal is when all of these things happen worldwide. You begin to see them going global. And that's what we're seeing now is an expansion from there's nothing that says the United States can't be in the midst of another war or depression or financial collapse. But what the key is, as we know we're getting closer to the time of the rapture, is that we're seeing it spread throughout the whole world. So what we can conclude is that the rapture, not the time of the second coming, because that's going to be a time of chaos unlike any other period, but the rapture will occur when things are still, quote, relatively normal. And I think we could easily see with all the things we just read and with everything that's happening in the world, we're slowly moving away and moving out of that period of normalcy. We're getting closer to the time of the tribulation. And so if the tribulation were to happen, say tomorrow, it would begin, we know from Daniel, when the Antichrist enters into some kind of treaty with Israel, probably a peace treaty. That's the official start of the tribulation, the 7 year period of tribulation. And I would venture to say, if any of us we're here when that event takes place and we watch it on the nightly news or we watch it, they have an interruption of the big news brief that the whole world can see, which by the way, when Revelation was written, certainly, how did John? John could not foresee the time we live today when the whole world can see what's going on at the same time. We have that technology and with the ability to do that. So, if that were to happen with what we know, we would expose Antichrist. And he has to come on the scene subtly and deceiving people. If we saw this leader, likely coming out of Western Europe somewhere, sitting down with a Bibi Netanyahu or whoever the leader of Israel might be, or maybe there's a whole group of them there, and this guy says, you will now be in peace and safety. You can build your temple. Islam has been dealt with in some way, we would know that that's the start of the tribulation. We would expose Antichrist, and he can't afford to have that happen. And so that's in my view, one of the main reasons why the tribulation or the rapture has to happen before the tribulation. The birth pangs of the tribulation are developing. They're developing during the church age. What's the church age? The church age began at Pentecost when the Holy Spirit, which we'll read more about, descended upon the upper room. And then Peter and the apostles were filled with the Holy Spirit. First time that had ever happened. And they went out and preached, and first day, 3,000 people accepted Christ. That was the start of the church age. The growth of the church began that day. But we know, as we read in Romans chapter 11, that the church age is going to end at some point in time. If we look at Romans chapter 11, beginning in verse 25. I do not want you, this is Paul writing to the church of Rome, I do not want you to be ignorant of this mystery. What's a mystery? A mystery that is something that had not been revealed before. So Paul is about to reveal something new. I don't want you to be ignorant of this mystery, brothers and sisters, that you may not be conceited. Israel has experienced a hardening in part, which means that because they rejected their Messiah, the Jews rejected their Messiah, God has placed on them blinders, if you will, which makes it very difficult for them to hear the gospel. And during this period when they're blinded, that's when the Gentiles, because it says here, Israel has experienced a hardening in part. And when it says in part, that just simply means that there are going to be Jews that accept Christ. And we know there are today. Amir Sephardi is a perfect example of a messianic Jew. So Israel has experienced a hardening in part until, that means a specific period of time, the full number of the Gentiles has come in. So what's he saying here? In some translation, it says the fullness of the Gentiles. That means that at some point in time, there will be a Gentile somewhere, someplace, I suspect it's very soon, that will accept Christ. And when that occurs, and only Jesus knows when it is, that's when the rapture takes place. When the fullness, the full number of Gentiles, that very last Gentile accepts Christ, the rapture takes place, and that marks the end of the church age. The church age is over. It began at Pentecost and will began at Pentecost and will end at the rapture. That's the end of the church age. And during that period of time, for 2,000 years or so, people, everybody, dead or alive, that accepted Christ are members of the church. We're members of the body of Christ. We're the bride of Christ. And as the bride, as Ed Heinzen used to say, Jesus is not going to beat up his bride. He has no reason to do that. You know, what benefit is there for his bride to go through the tribulation? And some people would say, well, you're just an escapist. And as I said last week, guilty. Yeah, I don't want to go through the tribulation. My blessed hope is not getting through the tribulation and surviving and trying to stay one step ahead of the Antichrist. My hope is that. And then it goes on to say in chapter 11 that the deliverer will come from Zion. He will turn godlessness away from Jacob. That's another way of saying that. Well, let's go back to verse 26. And in this way, what? When the rapture takes place, in this way, all Israel will be saved. During the start of the tribulation, sometime after the rapture, and I think there's probably some sort of gap. How long that gap is, we don't know, but it could be a couple of months, it could be a couple of years between the rapture and the start of the tribulation. But it says, all Israel will be saved. As it is written, the deliverer will come from where? Zion, which is Israel. That's the holy hill. That's where the temple was. He will turn godlessness away from Jacob, Jacob being Israel. So the church is gone. And when that takes place at the rapture, then God will focus his attention on Israel. So that's all the more reason why the church is not going to be a part of the tribulation, because it's all reserved and it's all primarily for Israel. So just one more.
Okay. You're talking about time when um, when Israel will be looking for or go into an agreement with the Antichrist. It seems to me, just in recent months, that Israel has stomped up, Gaza, and they've all but put that to bed. But they've been skirmishing with Hezbollah to the north for nearly as long. And I think tonight or tomorrow, the Israeli war cabinet is going to decide if it's time now to go to war with Hezbollah.
Right.
Soon, I'm sure, if it isn't today, tomorrow, something like that. The talk that I've heard all along is that Hezbollah is much stronger than Hamas.
Right.
Hamas, that's what I'm trying to think of, thank you, than Hamas in Gaza. And that Israel, this is key point here, without support from the United States, might not be able to defend itself, especially if Iran steps up and helps Hezbollah. Could this be, you're talking about this is very close. Could this be the beginning of that action that turns into Israel's need to enter into an agreement
Yeah,
for its own survival?
I think it's heading in that direction, certainly.
The beginning of
Yeah.
Ezekiel 38.
Yeah. See, I think the next thing after whatever happens with Hezbollah, and don't ever discount God. And I'm talking about the United States till the cows
We
come.
know it's going to end.
Yeah.
but-
Not even before how it ends. I think if you look at the history of Israel from 48 on, miracle after miracle after miracle, throughout all the wars they've engaged in. And some are so supernatural, it's mind-boggling. But at any rate, this is just me talking. I believe that whether the United States continues to support Israel or not, God's not going to let them. I don't think they're certainly not going to be defeated by Hezbollah. No.
But I'm saying until the time
Yeah.
they're forced to go into a peace agreement with the Antichrist.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
just wondering if we're almost at that precipice.
I think
and
what's,
whether
yeah.
Hezbollah
I
is part of
personally,
the
yeah.
stepping stone that gets us there.
Yeah, we're definitely, there's so much happening so fast. Now, the thing of it is, something's got to happen, obviously, with Hamas, with Hezbollah. And then I believe that Israel has to find itself, as we read in Ezekiel 38, in a time of peace and security.
The
And
last few years before October 7th kind of met that.
yeah, yeah. And that was, yeah.
Past that milestone.
No, I think they have to. When the invasion from Israel or from Russia and Turkey and Iran takes place, Israel at that time, and that invasion hasn't taken place, but Israel at that time has to be in a state of peace and security. At least they think they are.
But if we consider Hamas, that action, the last 6 months, as being the beginning of, let's say, the Hezbollah coming down, then they were maybe in relative peace and security before October 7th, and now there's
But now they're not.
Hamas.
Right.
Right, they were up until.
Right.
So if Hamas and Hezbollah becomes one real activity, one kind of morphs into the next,
Yeah.
then they were in peace and security before.
Right.
They don't have to go into it again, is what I'm saying, before Hezbollah.
I think they do have to go into it again somehow. I think so. Yeah, I do.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, God knows all the details, but very clearly, Ezekiel 38, 39 cannot occur until they're in peace and security, peace and safety. And
And the key
I
player
think
is Russia,
that
too,
means that,
in
yes,
that.
somehow, what we're seeing now, remember we talked about that inner circle of enemies, Hezbollah, Hamas, uh, Palestinian Authority, Islamic Jihad, they're all in that inner circle. Ezekiel 38's that outer circle. It's a whole separate group of nations. So I don't know what it's going to be. And people far smarter than me might have different ideas, but I just think that somehow, some way, and if you read Zechariah 12, it seems pretty clear that the IDF will take care of things themselves, at least as far as this inner circle is concerned. The outer circle, God's going to deal with that. Two separate things. So I don't know, John. I mean, it's there's a lot of speculation and a lot
Yeah.
of things could happen.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Ezekiel, for example, there are at least 6 or 7 different views on when that takes place. And that has that's significant. I believe it happens after the rapture, but who knows? Who knows? We'll see.
I guess I'm just wondering if all of this that we've had since October 7th
Yeah.
isn't all one big food,
Yeah.
the beginning of this.
Yeah, you know what I'll say?
It's already underway. Does that have to happen overnight?
Right.
Or could that be an 8 or 10 month or
Yeah.
a year long lead up to it?
From a human perspective, go ahead.
Oh, about what you read, okay, so 26, and so all Israel shall be saved. So this is during the tribulation?
Yes.
Well, I thought 2/3 of Israel wasn't saved.
Right.
So why does it say that?
Yeah, I think what is being referred to there, the most common view is that refers to that 1/3 that will survive, right? That's all. That's the all Israel.
The desecration
Yeah.
first.
Right. That's the all Israel. Yeah. Again, a lot of things will be known when they occur, but I think because you're right. Israel after the rapture, I mean, they're going to be in a period, they're going to think they're in peace and safety for that first 3.5 years because Antichrist is going to promise them that he and his armies or support is going to take care of Israel, enter into this agreement, allow them to rebuild their temple. And then at the midpoint, when Satan's cast out of heaven, they're going to, and they're likely going to think, see, the Jews don't think that Messiah's come. So when Antichrist comes on the scene, they're going to say, Messiah's here. But the 3.5 year point, they're going to say, he's not the Messiah. And that's when they will call upon the name of the Lord. Where Jesus, remember, said, I will not come back again until you, Israel, call upon me, the Lord Jesus Christ. So it's at that point that when it says all Israel is going to be saved, that means that they have to become Christians. That's the only way they can be saved. And they're going to realize, hey, this Messiah, um, he's the real deal. Jesus is the Messiah. You know, the Messiah, the Antichrist within the first 3 years is going to prove, the 3.5 years, that he's not. He's going to lead people to believe that he is, at least the Jews. So, a lot of things. I mean, he hasn't given us every precise detail, but I think we know the basic framework of what's going to happen. So, we talked about relative normalcy, and to me, the one thing that is taking place that is moving us outside this period of relative normalcy is this explosion that's just happened in the last several months of worldwide anti-Semitism. Is that normal? I mean, what happened in the 30s and the 40s, that was one evil nation that decided they were, going to destroy the Jewish people. But today, it's worldwide. The Maldives, and I'm not even sure where the Maldives are. Maybe somebody knows. Okay.
Where?
Off of Africa.
Oh,
They just have declared that Jews are no longer allowed to enter their territory. And you've got, and listen to Caroline Glick because she gets into this whole thing with the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice and what they're doing, and basically threatening to arrest Netanyahu and other leaders. I mean, the anti-Semitism is exploding everywhere. And I just saw today, I didn't get a chance to listen to it, but another documentary by somebody about how Jews are the Jews heading back to Israel is on the increase again, because there's no safe place for them to go. Yeah,
South Africa,
yeah,
Spain,
right,
and
yeah,
at least a dozen other countries.
yeah,
Norway,
Norway?
Yeah, anti-Semitism. Yeah.
Brazil, I think. Mexico is being either now is like the.
Okay, so what we've got here, and this is a study or a teaching that Mark Hitchcock did a couple of weeks ago. I'm just going to read a couple of points. He talks about anti-Semitism. He refers to it as the underlying fuse of anti-Semitism has been lit in our nation, has been brought out into the open. For example, here's just some facts that I didn't know, but here's some facts. 74% of adults surveyed say anti-Semitism is a very real or fundamental problem. 46% of Jewish respondents say they have changed their behavior due to fear. That's one half of Jews in America have changed their behavior out of fear. Younger generations in America have much more negative view of Jews than older ones. 48% of millennials and Gen Zs say that the United States government should support Israel, which sounds like it's significant, but it's less than 50%. Less than 50% of Gen Zs and millennials. And I just heard an interesting stat the other day. I think I mentioned it to somebody, but 4% of millennials are now considered to be born again. 4%. And a lot of that's tied into the educational system and critical race theory and all this other kind of stuff that is being forced down their throats. So it's no wonder that there's a growing number of young people that are against Israel. 1/3 of U.S. voters aged 18 to 24 believe that Israel doesn't even have a right to exist as a nation. Gen Zs, what's the age group for Gen Zs? Anybody know?
Syria will know.
Much less likely than all other 1/3. Wait a minute. Gen Zs are much less likely than all other groups to view Hamas as a terrorist organization.
Kind of what's happening.
Majority of voters overall support Israel's military campaign, but it is a minority view with Gen Z voters.
12 to 27
Okay.
years old.
58% of voters believe Israel's campaign is just, but 42% in the 18 to 24 range agree, which means 58% disagree. So unless there's a major shift, America is going to become more anti-Israel, anti-Semitic in the days and years to come. Unless something dramatic happens, support of Israel is going to continue to erode. And I think, and that's not just here, but it's around the world. It's a global phenomenon. I think that's among many other things, and of course the explosion of the desire for a world government and new world order, that's significant too. But this sudden out of nowhere global explosion of anti-Semitism, I believe, is a sign that the end is coming. Is a bad sign for America, and is a significant sign for the nearness of the rapture. So if America's support erodes, this gets to what John was just saying, I think God will protect Israel in other ways. However, from a human perspective, Israel is in serious trouble. There's going to come a point in time where even the IDF can't defend against everything that's going to happen. So America's got to be faithful to Israel right up to the time of the rapture. So what we're seeing with this deterioration of the relationship between the current administration, particularly, and Israel, and that could change. That could change with a new election. We don't know, but what we're seeing right now, um, it just portends that the rapture has got to be getting close, because this is global, and what it's doing is it's further fulfilling God's promise to bring the Jews back to their land, His land, and it's happening in vast numbers because of the fear. I mean, students at Columbia and other universities, Jewish students blocked from going to classes, threatened, beaten, and it's a lot worse than what we're even hearing and reading about.
What age was, what, you said Jewish college?
Yeah, yeah. So it makes sense that before America turns dramatically against Israel, that the rapture's got to happen before we totally turn away. And right now, the majority of citizens in this country support Israel. So if you think about it, it's just primarily our leadership, and certainly, we're being infiltrated by enemy groups, and it's having also a very negative impact. So we'll stop with this. We'll continue next week. The rapture, the catching up, the harpazo, the Latin word for harpazo that was in the Latin manuscripts is rapare, which is where we get the word rapture from. Now, some people will say, well, the word rapture is not in the Bible. Well, the word Trinity is not in the Bible either. That doesn't mean it's not true. It's in there, but you just have to go to the original Greek. The Greek for the words caught up that we read about in First Thessalonians is harpazo, which means to be violently caught up or to be snatched away. So that's where the rapture comes from. More on that next week.
So to mention a quick comment, because you're talking about meat, and they don't want to eat meat. I was watching a thing the other day, Lyme disease. Seems like a new problem, there's a new side effect of Lyme disease is a lifetime allergy to eating meat. You cannot have a side effect of having Lyme, some people, not everybody, but it's growing, that side effect is growing. You can't eat meat, you have an allergic reaction to meat.
You can't make this stuff up, can you?
Don't get Lyme, no. That's pretty cool. That's
It has something to do with the poison shot.
The what?
All right, so we'll get together again next week. Richard, you want to close us out?
Pretty good. Father gosh, thank you for this time. Thank you for the reminders. What the purpose that you have before us. We thank you, Father, that you can encourage on the words that you've heard, knowing that we have this blessed hope for you. Wake up every morning and looking up to see if maybe today is the day. It says, wake up, and where your redemption draws nigh. And so, Lord, we just pray that you bring us back next week, us to be prepared for the command. Allow us to take those opportunities to bring you prepared. Pray these things in Jesus.
Say there are 2 more weeks.
Good.
No,
give it a couple minutes.
2 more. Next week and the week after.
So it'll be the 10th,
11th and 18th.
18th, yeah.
It is a significant loss for the family-owned business. Everywhere you look, there are signs of trouble. Unfortunately, this is all happening at a time when foreigners have more control over our food supply than ever before. Foreigners now control 43 million acres of U.S. farmland, and this should deeply alarm all of us. Chinese entities hold ownership of farmland across 29 of the 50 U.S. states. I've been warning for many years that global food supplies would get tighter and tighter. Now it's happening right in front of our eyes, and hundreds of millions of people are going to bed every single night. I wish I could tell you that things will get better, but I can't. We really are living in the end times, and things that are written in the book of Revelation really will take place. So, just one more thing. Here's some good news. We've talked a lot about the World Health Organization treaty. Well, it didn't pass. Okay, which is a good thing. The World Health Organization had put forth or was pushing for an international pandemic treaty that is supported by the Biden administration, but it failed to pass. So here's a quick article. After 2 years of closed door, mostly secret negotiations, the World Health Organization came up virtually empty on agreeing to an international pandemic treaty. But the World Health Organization vows to continue its quest for sovereignty over world pandemic responses. On May 24th, Associated Press reported that Roland Dritchie, co-chair of the World Health Organization's negotiating board for the agreement, acknowledged that countries were unable to come up with a draft. The Health Organization had hoped a final draft treaty could be agreed upon at its yearly meeting of health ministries starting May 27th in Geneva. It goes on to say that while great progress was made during the negotiation, there are challenges still to overcome. And here's one of the more alarming parts of this article. Trouble is, Joe Biden already has submitted the U.S. to the WHO sovereignty via his global health strategy, which states, quote, the United States, together with its international partners, will enhance the prevention, detection, preparation for, and responses to infectious disease threats, whether naturally occurring, accidental, or deliberate in origin, across sectors at home and abroad, in order for our, quote, collective, sound like one world government, collective efforts to be more efficient, effective, sustainable, and equitable. In his detailed global health strategy, he is implementing the World Health Organization treaty, even without global agreement. The World Health Organization treaty, although rejected for now, already is built into U.S. policy. So certainly more to come on that. Okay. So with that, good news. And I just think it's good to keep track of what's going on because again everything it's just so much happening. You know, I was listening to Tom Hughes last week, and he had Don Stewart. Anybody know who Don Stewart is? On as a guest, and Don Stewart's he's a Bible scholar. He's written a bunch of books and really astute when it comes to particularly Bible prophecy. And he started a daily 15-minute news update, I think about maybe 6 months or a year ago. And he says that when he does these updates, he goes to the Bible, reads a passage in the Bible that's prophetic regarding the second coming. And then he says, are there articles in the news that we can point to that relate to what the Bible has to say, as opposed to, you know, focusing on world events and then trying to find a scripture. He goes strictly to the Bible and then identifies things that are happening. And so his updates are 15 minutes a day. But he just said the other day when he was on with Tom, so much is happening. He's increased it to 2 updates a day. That there's just so much happening. And it's like we said before, it's the convergence of so many things within the same general time period. And many will say the number one sign, other than all the individual things we're seeing, is the convergence. It's the coming together of so many things at one time. Statistically, it just can't happen. You know, when you look at Israel and you look at what's going on around the world. So, kind of what's going on there. So.